Hello, and thank you for joining us for this special series of interviews with the Democratic candidates for the Connecticut 1st District to the House of Representatives. I'm Carole Mulready, and I am the Voter Service Chair for the League of Women Voters of Greater Hartford. Our goal today is to help you to get to know the candidate beyond the headlines, to hear who Ruth Fortune is, where she comes from, and what fuels commitment to public service. Ms. Fortune is an attorney, and she currently serves on the Hartford Board of Education. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am pleased to be joined by a thoughtful and respected reporter who helps bring clarity to Connecticut's political conversations. Please welcome Lisa Hagen, the federal policy reporter in Washington, D.C. for the Connecticut Mirror. Lisa.
Thank you, Carole. Today we'll start with a conversation that spotlights the person behind the campaign, and we want to understand the experiences, values, and mindset that shaped how they would approach government. And so I will start with the first question for you. And so just kind of in that vein, tell me a bit more about your journey. And I guess rather than just kind of going through and reciting a resume, really kind of, we'd love to hear a story that, getting to know the person behind the campaign and how you would serve.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for the opportunity. One story that I've shared a lot on the campaign trail, and I seldom shared prior to me running for office, is really how I came to not be undocumented. My family moved here when I was 12 years old from Haiti, and we weren't refugees. We came here for economic opportunity. We were middle class in Haiti, though middle class in Haiti is very different than middle class here in the U.S. And when we came here, 8 of us shared one bedroom. That's all we could afford. I managed to graduate high school, got into college, still undocumented. I waitressed my way through college. My tips paid for tuition and for my living expenses. I was 4 months away from graduating with a corporate finance degree and no job prospects because I couldn't get the traditional work with benefits and with corporate employers. And a terrible earthquake ravaged Haiti. In response to that earthquake in January 2010, you might remember that, the Obama administration gave Haitians who were here without documentation temporary protected status, TPS for short. It's like DACA for dreamers, but for people from a country that's been ravaged by some type of natural disaster or other turmoil. And that completely transformed how I perceived government and how I wanted to be of service. Because for me, the timing was impeccable. Personally, I was able to pivot to, I was 21, learn how to do all of the immigration paperwork for myself and help my parents and my brother as well. And then once I had my work authorization card, I pivoted to applying to full-time jobs with benefits that I never would have had opportunity to do before. More importantly, it planted the seed that government is a force for good. When you have people in those roles who want to be of service, the idea that a tragedy off of our shores, all the way in the Caribbean, was used by a president in the United States to help Haitians here completely revolutionized how I see government transforming people's lives. Up until that point, I had internalized the shame of being undocumented. I thought my parents failed to plan properly. It was my own failure for not doing something that I should have done. Never did it occur to me that there's systemic and larger forces at play, and that it literally would take government action for my personal circumstances to change. And that's when that seed was first planted for me.
Great, thank you. Very good. So when in public service, what personal values are non-negotiable for you?
My very core value is family and the people I love first. I've known since I was a little girl that I would want to be a mom. And I've had the best mother in the world to emulate that to me. So when that seed was planted that at some point I'd want to be of service, I don't know that it was conscious, but I knew that first I want to have a family and be able to provide for them. So a lot of what I did, from career path to just personal choices, it's all to be able to have that family that I know I always wanted, an incredibly supportive husband. Then when we bought our house, we moved in with my parents. We retired my parents because then we'd have to help support them. They were earning poverty wages, not enough to pay for more than food and housing. My parents moved into our house with us 8 years ago when we bought our house. Now that I'm in a stage where my family is stable, I've chosen work deliberately that aligns with my values, but also allows me to more than provide for what my family needs. I felt that when Trump got reelected, all of that was at risk again. everything I've worked for, my personal comfort and privilege could be taken away. And I very deliberately chose discomfort. Running for Congress right now in this climate is me choosing discomfort because the comfort that I had and the privilege I had felt very temporary and short-lived. And I fear that if I don't do this, if I don't fight and lift issues that I know I have struggled with and other people face but are not able to fight for, my children will likely inherit in America where they have less rights and less opportunities than even I had as an undocumented child. And to me, what is the point of accumulating and being a first generational wealth builder to pass on a legacy to my children if they won't be in a country where they're fully free and they can be anything they want to be? And that's what drives me. And that's what I think every family member wants for their loved ones and for themselves. And ultimately, that's what I think government can help do, create a society where all of us can be the best version of ourselves if we're fortunate enough to be able to work for that.
And what are your top 3 policy priorities if elected, and why would those be the right priorities for Connecticut's 1st congressional district?
The top 3 priorities for me are priorities for this district, but also for us as a country as well, because whatever we do in Congress affects the entire country. First and foremost for me, it's ensuring that working folks earn a living wage. If you're working full-time, what you bring home should be able to cover the minimum cost of living. And what research shows nowadays, it's closer to about $50,000 that a single person needs to make to be able to afford rent and food and basic necessities. That translates to about $25 an hour. So one core policy for me is raising that federal minimum wage to $25 an hour and tying it to inflation. So that way, when the inevitable happens and prices go up, people's paychecks also go up. Secondly is health insurance. We are the only Western civilization where medical bankruptcy is something that happens. I specialize in trust and estate. At my first firm, I did 4 years with a heavy emphasis on elder law and Medicaid planning. And it was shocking to my conscience to realize that middle-class seniors, people who are retired professionals, nurses, teachers, principals, who owned their homes outright, paid it off, who did everything they were supposed to do, as they got to be in their 70s or their 80s, they realized that everything they've ever worked for could easily be depleted in a matter of just years on long-term care cost. Because a nursing home is about $15,000, $16,000 a month here in Connecticut. And for people who own their home and wanted that care at home, sometimes when they ran out of money, they'd be forced out of their homes and into a nursing home. And to be eligible for Medicaid to pay for long-term care, you have to be impoverished down to $1,600. So healthcare, covering long-term care under Medicare and making sure that healthcare is a universal right is something we can't afford to do as a country, and we must do to improve people's quality of lives. And third, it's a strong tie frame between housing and education. That's how Americans build wealth. It's buying their first home and having a home and being able to pay it off, but also education. That's the pipeline to improve yourself and learn and be able to pursue your career, whatever that might be. Government needs to invest to ensure that children, wherever they live, regardless of zip code, can get the best education possible. And also that Americans can buy a home. The average age for buying a home has been rising. It's now closer to 40 years old, right? And Trump's solution is let's do a 50-year mortgage, not let's make it more accessible and easier for people to buy a home. So those are some of my top priorities.
When you hear a policy idea that you don't initially agree with, how do you approach evaluating it fairly?
Gosh, so I'm trained as a lawyer, so when I hear something I don't agree with, I've practiced sort of delineating, is it that substantively I disagree with it, or is it because it's not practical? Because sometimes I might think something's a great idea, it's just not feasible and not practical. So for me, those are the two ways I try to approach it. If it's that it's not practical, why is it not practical? But if it's that substantively I disagree with it, why is it that I disagree with it substantively? And there are times when my views on things have evolved as I learn more about a topic, right? And I expect that to continue to be the case. That's normal and that's natural growth, right? That's us learning and adjusting. And as new information becomes available, new knowledge is created through research, et cetera, we should be able to continue to grow and change our opinions in the course of that.
How do you stay connected to the everyday concerns of residents? For example, big issues like cost of living, housing, healthcare, some of these things you've already mentioned, while also working on longer-term policy development.
So I do trust in the state, as I mentioned. So my work is helping families plan in the long term. Yet in my immediate family circle, I am seldom with people who have the luxury of planning for the long term. I have yet to do a financial plan or an estate plan for a family member other than myself and my spouse. Because most of my immediate family members are still in that daily grind, the day to day. You're not thinking of planning for 10 years ahead or even 3 years ahead if you're not sure where your next meal will come from, if you're not sure that the job that you have today you'll have in a month, if you're not sure how you could bury a loved one if they pass away. One clear day for me that I remember so vividly, I had someone who's worth about $500 million tell me that his 5 adult children, who are all in their 50s, never worked a day in their life, not a single one of the 5. That same day, I go home and my mom tells me that a friend in Long Island, New York, where I partly grew up, passed away, and she used to give me her hand-me-down clothes when we first got here. She passed away and her children didn't have enough money to bury her. So straddling those two worlds, literally every day, just because of the work I happen to do, keeps it in perspective. My parents are the people who get a Social Security check that is below the poverty level. And I remember at one point when I worked in wealth management, and someone mentioned to me that his pension was about $24,000. I'm thinking, wow, that's not great, but that's okay. And I learned it was $24,000 a month, right? I did not even know at the time that you could get a pension that high. So I see all of those things up close and personal because I live it personally, or it's my professional life at this point.
That's okay. I'm kidding. What actions would you support to restore the Fifth Amendment right of due process of law for all persons, including for immigrants?
It's the violation of our constitutional rights as people is starting with immigrants, but it doesn't end with immigrants. And we already see that it's bleeding into other people, right? If we think of the 2 people, Renee Good and Alex Brady, who were shot and killed in Minneapolis, they were U.S. citizens. They weren't immigrants. We have some laws that are simply not being enforced at the federal level and sometimes at the state level because they were drafted and approved without really any enforcement mechanism. So on the one hand, I do want to see the laws that we have some teeth to them to actually allow them to be enforced, but also empowering people whose rights are being violated to hold those people accountable. I mean, what we saw yesterday with the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, the Supreme Court saying individuals with disability themselves cannot challenge if their rights are being violated, they themselves cannot bring a challenge and say they need to have the same access and rights as everyone else. That's taking away that enforcement mechanism in our laws. And we need to be doing the opposite. We need to allow the very people who are being harmed, we need to allow them to challenge those harms, to hold people accountable, and provide an infrastructure and resources that they can use to challenge those people who are essentially depriving them of their constitutional rights.
Okay, thank you.
How can Congress restore its constitutional authority, which more recently has ceded some of that authority and that leverage and influence and power to the executive branch and specifically the Trump administration?
I'm very frustrated with how much power Congress has ceded to this president, particularly with Republicans in Congress. It goes to some of what you said earlier. I think allowing enforcement is a key piece. If we constituents can hold our elected officials accountable when they cede their power, they would then not have the option to cede that power. If our elected official has missed a number of votes, for example, and failed to vote on an issue, if we can then hold them accountable, not just with the ballot box, but actually bring a lawsuit against them for failing to if you have an enumerated power as a Congress member and you fail to act on that power, we, the people who elected you to vest you with the authority to exercise that power, should be able to hold you accountable.
Let's give you an opportunity to expand a little bit more on your discussion of the recent decision for disabled from the courts. to talk a little bit more about guaranteeing voter rights and access to the ballots, to the polls, and keeping the promise of one person, one vote. Can you tell us a little bit more about your stance in that area?
Oh gosh, there's so much to say about
Yes,
that.
there is.
One person, one vote is sacred. And there are so many hurdles and obstacles in the way of preventing people to really be able to vote freely. I mean, some very clear and obvious ones are elections are most often on a weekday when a lot of people are working. We can choose to have elections on a weekday and make that a holiday if we want. We just haven't done that. Or we can choose to have elections on the weekends when more people are not working and available to go and vote. We can choose to not have as much money in our elections so that the people with the most money don't have this outsized voice. We now have the first trillionaire ever. He could literally finance someone's entire campaign by just creating a PAC and just funding with as much money as he wants. That's not really democracy. That's not what we intend when we say one person, one vote, and that we all should be able to participate and engage in our democracy. I foresee reforms like only allowing people who live within the geographic area of a certain candidate to donate to their campaigns, right? I'm running in the 1st district. I should be forced to raise money from only people who live in the 1st district, period. You're running within the state of Connecticut, you raise money from people in Connecticut so that the people affected by your leadership are the ones who get to invest in your campaign and how you proceed. And I also want to see all the states allow people to vote via absentee ballot if needed, to have early voting that is widely available, to ensure that our election days, the polls are open for 15 hours a day from 6 to 9 a.m. like we have in New York. Here in Connecticut, mostly it's about 14 hours a day, to make it as accessible to people as possible, not less accessible.
Thank you. Okay.
Pivot to another really critical issue. Affordability is going to be one of the main issues of this election, not just in Connecticut, but all over the country. And especially after prices spiking due to the war in Iran. And so what's one policy proposal you'd want to prioritize if elected to Congress that could help lower costs for families and also for people on fixed incomes?
I mean, 2 of them I've alluded to. One is healthcare. I think I'm a very savvy consumer and I'm able to price shop and make very deliberate decisions as to how I spend money. And I can tell you the thing I dread the most that my husband and I have to do annually is compare our 2 insurance policies through our respective employers. It feels like blind shopping because we never really will know which is more cost effective for a number of reasons. That process should just be easier and more transparent. And if we have universal health care, then we really eliminate that because we know we all have health insurance. Maybe we're still picking what plan is best given your health and age and so on, but we know you're getting health care and it will cover the care that you need. So health care is a huge variable in people's budgets that really few of us are immune to. I'm pretty solidly middle class at this point, but if I go through an extended period of severe illness and high medical costs, and my husband goes through that, that can bankrupt our family. And I think that's most middle class families in this country. And then secondly, for me, there's a lot of emphasis on affordability and on lowering prices. Government really has less control over that. It's just the reality of it from an economic standpoint. What we have more control over is ensuring that people who work are paid a living wage and that their wages do keep up with inflation. And that's why for me, the way to tackle this is primarily by ensuring that working folks earn a living wage, because that's the stuff that government can do and can do well without really being intrusive in private business, but ensuring that if you're a company and you're profitable and you have healthy, capable people working for you, you have to pay them a living wage. We should not have to subsidize the people who work for profitable companies by providing housing or by having to provide health care. Or sometimes people have to go to food banks who work full time because they don't qualify for SNAP because they earn too much, but they earn too little to actually be able to pay for all of their necessities.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about the environment. What specific interests rise to the top for you regarding the environment, and are there any regulations that you would want to address either to strengthen or keep that we currently have, or to change, get rid of?
The environment to me is a fascinating issue. I have yet, and it could be my personal experience, which is limited, I have yet to be in my community of, say, immigrant Haitians where that's a question that's even asked. Because the way people experience the environment is more so, do I have food? Do I have a safe place for my kids to be? So even the idea of the environment sounds so abstract in some communities. For me, the way that I personalize it is, can you have green spaces in your community? Do you have parks where your kids can play? Can you have a garden in your community where you can have access to food? Is your community a food desert? Because grocery stores won't even come into your community because you're not worth that investment to them. And I think until we really personalize it and make it that tangible to people, it really does come off as this elitist issue. If you're struggling to put food on the table, if it's safer for your kid to be inside watching TV than outside because there's gun violence, you're not thinking environment, you're just thinking day-to-day safety. And my view is we want to create those spaces in all communities, but we want to make it small and tangible and very localized because that's how it really reaches people. And all of the other economic setbacks, I think, are more severe for marginalized communities because of all the reasons I mentioned. If you don't have green spaces, you don't have access to food because you're in a food desert and so on, you also tend to be in an economically depressed area in the first place. So until we invest in people and give them more choice, simply saying we want better environmental policy, it just does not reach to people who are more severely impacted by those failed policies, in my view.
Thank you.
Republicans currently hold both majorities in Congress and as well as the White House. And so the balance of power in Congress will be on the ballot in November and will be at stake. And so how do you think you could be effective in Congress, regardless of whether Democrats hold or get the House or they still are in the minority?
So I'm very frustrated by Democrats who are Congress members, whether senators or representatives, who feel like they don't have power because we don't have the majority. I'm running for Congress, and I feel like just in this journey of me running for Congress, I have so much more influence and the ability to actually make a difference, although not at the same level that I would if I am elected to Congress. If you feel that the power is not in that building because you don't have the votes, then it's on you to go and find how else you can make an impact and where you can harness power to push for the agenda that you want. If it's not in the halls of Congress, go find the people who want to earn a higher wage. There's tens of millions of them in this country. Go find the people who are underinsured or uninsured, organize them because they want to see reform with respect to healthcare. Find those people and bring their voices and their stories to Congress and to the ballot box so that you can get the more traditional power. But even if you get power, if you have not been doing that work, when you seize power, it's meaningless because you don't have the infrastructure to actually be able to deliver legislative results.
Interesting. Thank you. As we're nearing the end of our program here, is there any particular topic that we have not touched upon that you would like to discuss?
Just this morning, a reporter reached out and said to me, Ruth, you don't really speak about the other candidates. Why is that? And I said, well, fair question. For me, what has always been successful has been focusing on what I want and making everything else just the hurdles and the obstacles that are in the way, right? Find your North Pole and just go for that. And the reason I entered this race, I think, speaks for itself. If I thought the person who represents me was doing the job the way it should be done, I would not choose to run. I would not choose discomfort over what I've done over the past 11 months. Over that 42-day period of collecting signatures, there were times I was out for 14 hours a day collecting signatures. Sometimes in the sun. I think I got my first few sunburns over the course of those 42 days. And I am choosing to do this, but it's really not a choice because I feel that if all of us don't do as much as we can now, we may not have the right to fight to recoup what we've lost in the future. So when I don't focus on other candidates in the race and I focus on what I would like to see done in the future I want for my children and for this country, It's in part because that's what attracted my family to the US. My mom had a steady job working for the Canadian ambassadors in Haiti. She got her paycheck. She worked 6 days a week, like 12 hours a day. We only had Sundays with her. And she had the foresight and the vision to know that if we stay here, my children will get an education, but they may never do any better than I did. So she came here so that my brother and I can actually have better lives than she did. So that if we work, we don't just pay the bills, we can actually live and thrive. And that's what I honor her sacrifice by having been singularly focused on succeeding. And there's sacrifices I've had to make along the way to get to this point. But when I see that I was once on the outskirts of the law and felt that I didn't deserve the protection of the law because I was undocumented, and to now see that the rule of law is actively being changed to exclude me once again, that's what motivates me and makes me know that I need to be a part of this fight, because I know what it was like to feel excluded. And now that I am in the in-group who benefit from the prosperity of this country, I still see so many others who never really get to benefit and participate the way I have. And I think that experience keeps me grounded. And it is the very experience that we're lacking in Washington, D.C. So many of our leaders are born into privilege, and that privilege has afforded them luxuries that I never had, but my children will have because I have that privilege now to offer to them. What has shaped me as a person really has been the obstacles that I've overcome, less so my accomplishments and my success. And I think when we have people in positions of power who've had accumulated success after success, accomplishment after accomplishment, but whose characters have never really been tested, who've never known what it's like to go without basic necessities, who've never felt the pain of uncertainty with just basic needs in life, they approach the work differently. They choose fights that they think they can win, not the fights that we need to fight, right? The odds, I'm a very pragmatic numbers person. I was a corporate finance major. Math has always been my strongest subject. I know the odds right now are not in my favor, but I've defied the odds before. The odds of me being here as a US citizen and an attorney, when 26 years ago I was undocumented and did not speak a word of English, those odds were lower than the odds of me now being on the ballot, and certainly the odds of me then being elected to Congress. And while the work is hard and the outcome is not certain, I know that the only way we're guaranteed to lose is to not fight at all. If we're in the fight and we fight with all we have, then we have a chance of winning. And no matter how slim that chance is, it's a chance worth taking because there's so much at stake.
All right. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for having me. This
You're
is
very
wonderful.
welcome. It has been wonderful to meet you and to share your thoughts with our audience. So at this point, we want to thank Ruth for being with us, and also to thank the Connecticut Mirror and Lisa Hagen for her participation here, and all the staff and people of the West Hartford Community Interactive organization. So all of you, we hope, will vote in the election that comes in the fall, November 3rd this year. But right now we're preparing for the primary elections, and August 11th is primary day in Connecticut. So check out your registration to make sure you can participate in any of the primaries that are being held. And you can do that by checking vote411.org, which is a League of Women Voters site that will allow you to find out, am I registered, or the Secretary of the State's search engine, and you search voter registration, look up CT, and you will be taken right to the page where you find that out. So again, thank you for watching, and make sure you vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.